Gaggle will challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli. It is now 9:18 p.m. from, yes, Budapest, which is actually quite cold, quite wet, quite rainy, and the weather is not at all spring-like. So, on with that somewhat cheerless greeting. Welcome everybody who has joined me. It is now time for our Tuesday night live stream. So very happy to be with you. And there are a number of uh, stories that is worth discussing today. Obviously, the big news that broke this morning was the assassination of Ali Larijani. Um, Israel is obviously boasting about this and is very, very delighted by it. But what I think is most striking about this kill is that it's more or less ensuring that Trump, who I think does want to get out of this somehow, I mean, he's got himself into a real mess, is being prevented from getting anything uh, done by Israel, who's just simply going ahead and doing what it had promised to do, which is to kill off anybody at all who seems to be a leader of Iran. And so Trump, who has claimed in the past few days, oh, they're going to come to me and I'm going to make a decision as to who the leader is. Well, that decision is being taken out of his hands because Israel has said, and one has to accept this, that they will kill everyone who emerges as as a possible leader of Iran. So we saw that Larijani, appeared to be a kind of a de facto leader, but he appeared in public, and therefore, I mean, he was at the Al Quds demonstration the other day, very much in public, um, and uh, and so therefore he's obviously was um, going to be targeted, and so therefore, Larijani was assassinated. Now, you then have to say, well, what exactly is the strategy? What is the point of these assassinations? Then we say, well, obviously, the point is to keep this war going, to ensure that there are no negotiations possible, there are no negotiated outcome is possible. And that's what Israel is doing. Israel wants the United States to do its work for it, which is to lay to waste Iran, not just remove the government of the Ayatollahs, but really to decimate Iran, so that Iran ceases to be any kind of a regional power. And so so whoever, I mean, there's Larijani today. I would imagine. I don't know whether Khamenei's son, who's the new leader of Iran, I don't know whether he's still alive, but I would have thought that he would be that Israel is targeting him, and therefore Trump's assertion that, well, they're going to come to me and I'm going to make a decision. Is we're going to have the Delcy Rodriguez option. We're going to have some suitable leader, someone that I can sign off on. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen because obviously Israel has made the decision that we will eliminate anybody who is the leader of Iran. So that as well, and therefore the United States will be involved in a forever war with Iran, which can only end in the total destruction of Iran, and that's Israel has obviously always wanted that, and Israel that's step one, and then of course step two, the destruction of all of the Gulf states. Step three, the destruction of Saudi Arabia. Step four, the destruction of Turkey. I mean that's the Israel agenda, and Trump has signed off on it because when he starts ranting and raving, then he has very great difficulties expressing any agenda, any that of his own, what he wants to see himself, what is the US goal, what's he as president of the United States, what does he want in Iran. Instead, he just sort of goes on and on and on. Oh, Iran can't have nuclear weapons. Iran have nuclear weapons. But that's not on the agenda. Oh, Iran did all these things for 47 years. Now, Israel, of course, does have a very specific agenda, and is pursuing that agenda, and has got a complete clodhopper in the White House ready to enact that agenda. I mean, Netanyahu has been trying to do this since 1996, and he's finally succeeded. Now, as you know, we had the resignation, the first major resignation in the Trump administration, namely the counter intelligence chief, well, not counterterrorism chief, Joe Kent, who worked under Tulsi Gabbard and had been a strong critic, as Gabbard was, of forever wars. So if one remembers him from 2020 through to 2024, he was always on these various shows. He was a regular on Tucker Carlson's show, criticizing forever wars, criticizing Middle East wars, and then he would also be on Bannon's show, and again said no more of these forever wars. And of course, his wife was killed in Syria. Though she was killed in 2019, early 2019, following Trump's commitment. That didn't seem like a very very firm commitment, but it was Trump's commitment to withdraw from Syria. So he said, yeah, we're going to withdraw from Syria in 2018. He, of course, came under a lot of attack, if you recall. You remember when Susan Rice came on one of those late night shows? I think it was Colbert. And she said, it was, God, how can anyone be so stupid as to withdraw from Syria? She was sort of had her head in her hands, and the audience, the Colbert's audience, were of course guffawing, and yes, how can anyone be so ridiculous as to want to withdraw U.S. forces from Syria? That's edgy comedy. We want to stay in Syria anyway. Joe Kent's wife was killed in 2019. And Kent, of course, himself had served, and I think he had 11 calls of duty. So his wife was also served. So he became this notable critic of forever wars. And then, of course, he ran for Congress, unsuccessful, I think, in 2022, 2024. And then he got a job in the administration working under Tulsi. Now he was, I mean, we were looking for some signs in this administration of the critics of the forever wars. That was, after all, Trump's platform in 2016, Trump's platform in 2020, Trump's platform in 2024. No more forever wars, no more neocon wars, no more color revolutions, no more regime change wars. And so and Tulsi and Joe Kent were very much associated with no war with Iran. She said it over and over again. So therefore, we've mentioned before. Well, where is Tulsi? I remember when she testified in Congress, I think March of 2025, as the new DNI. She said, "No, I think Iran is not building nuclear weapons. Iran has no interest in building nuclear weapons." And then Trump, when he signed on to the Israel plan to attack Iran, and then was asked, because after all, Trump was saying, "Well, they're very close to nuclear weapons," said, "Well, your own DNI said that Iran was not interested in having nuclear weapons. Iran wasn't anywhere near having nuclear weapons." And he said, "Well, she's wrong." So he dismissed his own DNI and accepted the assertions of Israel. So we waited for something from Tulsi. Tulsi has said nothing. She hasn't even made any kind of an appearance. While Trump has been blustering about how close Iran is to having nuclear weapons, where is she? She's the one who said, she's supposed to be the person in charge of intelligence gathering. So she has at her fingertips all of the most up-to-date, most accurate intelligence findings of the U.S. intelligence community, and she's been nowhere. Not only has she been nowhere, she hasn't even responded to Trump's dismissal of her findings. Trump, who spoke very scornfully about her back in last June. And instead, she's sort of been blustering on about Georgia and the supposed election fraud in Georgia in 2020. I mean, there's a way of sucking up to Trump, obviously. But it's very strange. Why does she need to suck up to Trump? I mean, why don't just simply stand on principle? This was her shtick. From 2018 on, she was against these forever wars, interventionism. She ran in 2020 seeking to the nomination of the Democratic Party on an anti-war platform. And then she was a stand-in for Tucker Carlson on his show on Fox News, always with that same against forever wars message. And she then switched over in 2024. She joined Trump, so ended her affiliation with the Democratic Party, joined Trump, and said, "Well, I'm joining Trump because he's anti-war. He's against forever wars. He's against these stupid Middle East wars. He's the man who's going to keep us out of wars." So therefore, we waited. Okay, well, when is she going to make an appearance? When is she going to resign? Well, evidently, she values her job and values her paycheck more than any of these principles that she supposedly espoused. But anyway, her assistant, Joe Kent, did indeed resign. And of course, his resignation was quite interesting because he, basically addressed the elephant in the room. And that's what's caused the real controversy, the real anger that has been directed against him. The real anger, not just, from people that you might have, thought, well, of course, they're going to be pissed. But from people in the media. Because what you can't do, what you can never do, is say that Trump is waging a war for Israel. That you cannot do. That you absolutely cannot do. And then you're really going to come under attack. Anyway, here's then the letter that Joe Kent released today. And let's take a look. So here was the President Trump. After much reflection, I have decided to resign from my position as director of the National Counterterrorism Center effective today. I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. I support the values and the foreign policies that you campaigned on in 2016, 2020, and 2024, which you enacted in your first term. Until June of 2025, you understood that the wars in the Middle East were a trap that robbed America of the precious lives of our patriots and depleted the wealth and prosperity of our nation. But the crucial thing was in that second paragraph. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, which is obvious. I mean, whatever missiles Iran has, none of those missiles can reach the United States. And clearly, there's no evidence whatsoever that Iran was close to having nuclear weapons. So Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. So this is obviously the key sentence, which has caused this great deal of anger today, and has resulted in so many attacks on Joe Kent. I cannot say that. Even though, I mean, you'd have to be a complete buffoon, a doofus, not to see cause and effect. Trump has met Netanyahu 7 times since January the 20th, 2025. Now, he hasn't met anyone else as frequently as that. Iran poses no imminent threat to the United States. Iran has never posed any kind of a threat to the United States. It only poses a threat to Israel. Every president, every American president, since 1980s or every Israeli leader since the 1980s and 1990s has tried to press the United States into going to war against Iran. And then, every single one of them, and all of the presidents, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Biden, all said, we're not going to do it. Until Trump said he was going to do it. And this is obvious. All right, but let's go on for a little bit more with this letter. And then he says, in your first administration, you understood better than any modern president how to decisively apply military power without getting us drawn into never-ending wars. You demonstrated this by killing Qasem Soleimani and by defeating ISIS. Now, people have sort of jumped on this to show, oh, well, look, he's a hypocrite, and so on. He supports the killing of Soleimani and, fighting ISIS. Oh, so he's insincere. Well, not really, because he was running for Congress, and he was running for Congress on Trumpian platform. He couldn't very well attack what Trump did during his first term. I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously killing Soleimani was a really bad idea. And the whole ISIS thing has always been a joke. I mean, America's never, America has never fought ISIS. ISIS has always been a U.S. creation, and we can see that in what happened in Syria. Jolani, so the new leader of Syria, who gets to enjoy visits to the White House, was ISIS. He's the real, the real Islamist fanatic. Yet, he's the one who's in power. He's the one who gets embraced by Trump and all of the Western leaders. So, I think Joe Kent was wrong there in praising the killing of Soleimani. However, you could also argue that when Trump did those things, however ill-advised, they didn't lead to forever wars. So at least in that sense that Trump said, well, we're not going to have any more forever wars. We're not going to have these prolonged military engagements in the Middle East. I mean, Soleimani was an in and out thing. He didn't fight ISIS, but he killed al-Baghdadi. Didn't make any difference. I mean, since Trump, well, actually it was Biden, but Trump was signed off on it. ISIS was allowed to come to power in Syria, so there was never any fight against ISIS. I mean, well, that was just bogus. It was a fraud. But nonetheless, Joe Kent, running for Congress in 2022, 2024, was obviously touting the great accomplishments of Trump in killing al-Baghdadi and in assassinating Soleimani. But at least, it wasn't it didn't lead to a protracted American engagement, unlike the Bush-Cheney war. So I don't really see that there's any huge inconsistency, huge hypocrisy on Joe Kent's part in bringing that up. And then let's just go on with this letter. It says, early in this administration, high-ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media deployed a misinformation campaign that wholly undermined your America First platform and sowed pro-war sentiments to encourage a war with Iran. This echo chamber was used to deceive you into believing that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States. And that should you strike now, there was a clear path to a swift victory. This was a lie and is the same tactic the Israelis used to draw us into the disastrous Iraq war that cost our nation the lives of thousands of our best men and women. We cannot make this mistake again. So this comment, let's just read that again. It says, this echo chamber was used to deceive you into believing that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States, and that should you strike now, there was a clear path to a swift victory. This was a lie and is the same tactic the Israelis used to draw us into the disastrous Iraq war, and that cost our nation the lives of thousands of our best men and women. All right. Now, if you've been watching, the mainstream media today, particularly CNN, they're all, oh, no, there was no way, no how that Israel dragged the United States into the Iraqi invasion. No. Some idiot, their sort of Israel correspondent, CNN's Israel correspondent, said, oh, no, I mean, it's rumored that Ariel Sharon actually told George W. Bush that he doesn't want this war on Iraq. He much prefers to focus on Iran. Now, this moron, I don't know. I mean, he was his name. This absolute moron on CNN. He's the CNN correspondent in Israel. Doesn't seem to realize that, first of all, by saying Ariel Sharon, saying, hey, focus on Iran, that would suggest that Joe Kent is right. If Ariel Sharon already 20 years ago was urging George W. Bush to focus on Iran, well, yeah, then it does sound like this policy is being cooked up in Israel. But be that as it may, this nonsense, this absolute nonsense, that somehow Israel had nothing to do with the invasion of Iraq, is just absolutely ridiculous. The war on Iraq, the invasion of Iraq, was cooked up in the 1990s by the key figures who were in the Paul Wal- the Rumsfeld Pentagon, that included Wolfowitz, Douglas Feith, Richard Pearl, and Wormser, David Wormser. These people were Israel agents first and foremost, and they were working together with the Likudniks in Israel to come up with this program of removing governments in the Middle East that were not to the liking of Israel. And the plan was that Israel and the United States would do this together, or i.e., the United States would do this. The United States would do this on behalf of Israel, because the people who were working on this, the people who cooked up this plan, they issued their document, this essentially this Israeli think tank, which they worked. Feith, Pearl, Wolfowitz, Wormser, all of these characters were on this think tank, who came up with this plan to remove Iraq, remove Syria, and then the ultimate prize was Iran. And that, so the idea that somehow Israel had nothing to do with it, we have the whole record of this. This was a steady drumbeat during the 1990s, and you saw this regularly appearing in the Weekly Standard. You remember the Weekly Standard, that creation of Rupert Murdoch's, published by Bill Kristol and John Podhoretz. And week in, week out, they would be publishing articles demanding the removal of Saddam Hussein. And it was very strange because if you look back on those days, you think, well, why focus on Saddam Hussein? Because this was already after Gulf War One. He was under sanctions. He was a completely diminished figure. But no, this was part of this regime change operation cooked up by Israel and these neocons. And then all of these neocons were hired by Rumsfeld in the Pentagon. And they seized their opportunity after 9/11 to essentially enact this agenda. And this is all coming from Israel. So the idea of CNN pretending, oh, no, this has nothing to do with Israel, nothing to do with Israel. We have the record. I mean, why are we having a debate about this now when this was 20 years ago was already established that the invasion of Iraq was the creation of the neocons and who were in the Pentagon and who were basically working in tandem with the Israeli government. So, oh no, nothing to do. And Ariel Sharon told rumor to it. Where's the evidence? Whenever I read this, that Ariel Sharon told George W. Bush that he didn't want America to invade Iraq, he's like, okay, well, where's the evidence for this? Can you show me, when the meeting, the phone call when Sharon said this? No, this was made up. It's an invention. This is what the Israel lobby does. They just invent stuff, and then it just gets repeated without anyone ever bothering to check, well, where's the evidence that this was Sharon did not want the invasion of Iraq? Of course, Sharon wanted invasion, right? Israel's always wanted an invasion of Iraq. Um, anyway, so that was obviously Joe Kent is absolutely right. That invasion was for Israel. Now, the fact that some Americans actually made a lot of money out of it is neither here nor there. Americans can make a lot of money almost anywhere. That's no. It's effortless for Americans to make money. They can make money in the Gulf states. They can make money in Saudi Arabia. They can make money anywhere. That's not the issue that they made money on the Iraq war. What the issue is, why was this done? Why was Iraq invaded? And of course, Israel. Why is Iran under attack? Israel. Anyway, so he goes on. Ken goes on. As a veteran who deployed to combat 11 times and as a Gold Star husband who lost my beloved wife Shannon in a war manufactured by Israel. And now here we had in other ones, people saying, "Oh, well, it's not a this was in 2019 in Syria. That was about fighting ISIS. That had nothing to do with Israel." People like Michael Tracy come up with, "Oh, he's just making this stuff up. It has nothing to do with Israel." Well, of course it was about Israel. Syria was one of the governments that the government of Bashar al-Assad was exactly one of the governments that the neocons wanted overthrown. It was there. It was in that document, which they published in the 1990s. So yeah, that's why. Why was the United States in Syria? It wasn't to fight ISIS. What's nonsense? I mean, I have people just buying into this nonsense that they were fighting ISIS. Of course, the Americans were not fighting ISIS. It was all about the removal of the Assads from Syria, and which eventually it was accomplished. That was exactly for Israel. I mean, Syria didn't pose any kind of a threat to the United States. It's so ridiculous. The people say, "Oh, that had nothing to do with Israel." Well, what did it have to do with? Why would there be U.S. forces in Syria? What's in Syria? How does Syria in any way pose a threat to the United States? It doesn't. Now, the Bashar al-Assad in Syria, next door to Israel, yeah, that's a different issue. So, of course, that U.S. presence was about Israel. So, but you have, as I say, there's really, really dumb stuff that people are putting this out. Oh, I had nothing to do with Israel. Like Michael Tracy's putting this nonsense out. And anyway, he just finish this letter off. I pray that you will reflect upon what we are doing in Iran and who we are doing it for. The time for bold action is now. You can reverse course and chart a new path for our nation, or you can allow us to slip further toward decline and chaos. You hold the cards. It was an honor to serve you in the administration and to serve our great nation. So as soon as he published this letter, the attacks on him started. So here's Amos Hochstein. You remember him? He worked for Biden. He was the sort of the kind of go-to man on to deal with Lebanon, with Israel and Lebanon. And so here is Amos Hochstein. Whether you support the war or oppose it, Joe Kent is a well-known neo-Nazi racist. Oh, that's good. Well, so that's him dealt with. So he's a guy served his country. Wife served his country. Wife was actually killed serving his country. He's a well-known neo-Nazi racist. This is a person who worked in the U.S. government at the highest levels. As I say, he was the point man on Lebanon in the Biden administration. No one should be taking anything he says seriously. Of course not. Even if you happen to agree with some elements. And then Max Blumenthal rightly comments on this. it's not neo-Nazi to point out that you, Amos Hochstein, served in the Israeli army, not America's, then used your position in the Biden administration to steer US policy in support of Israel's destruction of Lebanon. That's it, yeah. Yet another one of these characters, strange characters working in the US government, who serves in the who serves in the Israeli army, but doesn't serve in America's army. Then, of course, the repugnant Mark Levin, and here he is. We shouldn't criticize. Oh, he questions. We shouldn't criticize Kent because of his military service. Nobody actually said Kent shouldn't be criticized because of his military service. And is somebody criticizing him for his military service? He's accused of leaking information to undermine the commander-in-chief and the war effort. So now this is the new one. Oh, he was leaking information, which is being fought by military heroes right now. Fought by military heroes for your country, your country, Israel. That's okay. That's precious and repulsive. This gentleman below was relentlessly denounced, and he didn't do anything like Kent is accused. Oh, there he's talking about that that Republican, the one-eyed Republican, or the Republican who has an eye patch. I've forgotten his name. He served in the military, but he's one of these, one of these McCaniacs. Anyway, Levin. Here's Mark Levin again. Where he's now retweeting Bernie Sanders. This is Joseph Kent, a top counterterrorism official under Trump, just resigned. Kent and I don't agree on much, but he is right. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it's clear, and so on. And then Levin says, we will now witness the Marxist Islamists join with the woke Reich neo-fascists. You know what? Who are these Marxist Islamists? Anyway, join with the woke Reich. I have no idea what the woke Reich is. Woke Reich neo-fascists in their Jew hatred and Trump smearing. Well, of course, this is the classic case. They're always bringing up this Jew hatred, i.e., criticism of Israel and the Israel lobby, Jew hatred, and Trump smearing. Here's Bernie the Red jumping right into action. And then we have another figure from the era of George W. Bush's war, Mark Thiessen, who worked in the Bush White House. You can see, look at all these flags that he has there: Ukrainian flag, the Israeli flag, and here's Thiessen says, "How little you think of Donald Trump that you believe he can be so easily manipulated by Israel." It wasn't easy. It took 7 meetings. No one manipulated him into this war. And how pathetic you use anti-Semitic tropes to justify your resignation. Oh yes, of course, it's all anti-Semitic. To point out that U.S. policy is led by Israel. There's nothing anti-Semitic about it, but yeah, it happens to be true. And then this Taylor Budovich, another one of these strange figures who worked for Trump, kind of emerged sometime after 2020 and the work of Trump, and then he was in the Trump White House, then he left. And Taylor Budovich says, Joe Kent is a crazed egomaniac who was often at the center of national security leaks while rarely never producing any actual work. Look at that nice way of attacking this. He spent all of his time working to subvert the chain of command and undermine the President of the United States. So it's very interesting how that the apparat now goes into action, denouncing Joe Kent, saying, so he was leaking, he's anti-Semitic, he's a neo-Nazi, he was subverting the chain of command and undermining the president. This isn't some principled resignation. He just wanted to make a splash before getting canned. What a loser. Now, what's interesting is quite clearly, you can't say it's not a principled resignation. It is exactly a principled resignation, because he is saying in that letter of resignation the kind of things he was saying when he used to go on Tucker Carlson's show, and when he used to go on Bannon, when Bannon was pretending to be against forever wars. Bannon was pretending to be supporting Trump, because Trump is the peace candidate. Trump is going to keep America out of wars. And so Joe Kent would come on and put forward that position. And he would say, yeah, I fought in America's wars. My wife was killed. I don't want that to happen again. That's exactly what it's a principled position. That's all I remember him for whenever he made those appearances. I don't want any more wars. And the unprincipled position are the people who embraced MAGA, pretended that they were against wars, but in fact, they were whoring for war, and are now banging their fists, in triumph over this attack on Iran. And then Levin again, was he Catalson's deep throat? So this is when he's, now, this is Tucker Carlson's deep throat, just throwing around these smears. And then Sarah Fields, another one of these neocons. Joe Kent was a registered Democrat until 2021. Oh no. Kent was affiliated with the Libertarian Party from 2012 to 2019. Okay, well, that would suggest that he was quite principled. Then switched to the Democratic Party in 2019. He remained a Democrat through 2020, including voting for Bernie Sanders in the Democratic Party that year. He switched to the Republican Party in 2021. When he began running for Congress in Washington 3rd District as a Republican, starting around that time. And I mean, these are the people who kind of embraced Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's been a Democrat all of his life, who bought into the whole Russiagate nonsense, and then ran as a Democrat, then decided he was going to run as an independent, and then he decided he was going to throw in his lot with Trump, all in the space of just about 3 months. But they don't have a problem with that. They're suddenly, Joe Kent was affiliated with the Libertarian Party from 2012 to 2019. Anyway, and then here is a Fox News correspondent who says, a senior administration official told Fox Joe Kent was a known leaker. Oh, well, if a senior administration official told Fox, it must be true. Joe Kent was a known leaker, and he was cut out of POTUS intelligence briefings months ago. The White House told Tulsi Gabbard that he should be fired for suspected leaks, but she never did. He has not been part of any Iran planning discussions or briefings at all. Well, he probably wouldn't be. I mean, I guess his feelings about the Iran attack was well known. Oh, and where's Tulsi Gabbard? And then Jackie Heinrich, another one of these Fox News creatures. Senior administration official says Joe Kent was a known leaker and was cut out of POTUS intelligence briefings months ago. He has not been part of any Iran planning discussions or briefings at all. So, I mean, get the script out. Official says that also says the White House told DNI Gabbard Kent should be fired for suspected leaks, but she never did. It's the same story. And then here's Glenn Beck. Remember him? He's a figure from the the Iraq War era. Glenn Beck. Joe Kent, a top counterterrorism official, resigned today, claiming that Trump was duped by Israel into starting a war with Iran. Okay, Joe, where's the evidence? The consequences of a claim like this are too dire not to be backed with facts. If you have them, I'll stand with you, but present the evidence. All right. Now, if you recall, Glenn Beck, in 2003, he had a very successful radio show, and he was a big booster for the invasion of Iraq. And then he was hired by Fox News in I guess I can't know, around 2008, 2009. And that's when, if you recall, he used to do that whole thing. He had a whiteboard, and he would do these diagrams or whatever. And then he was known for weeping. He would just start weeping, and he was just saying, I just love this country so much. I love this country, and he would just weep and weep and love this country. I mean, Fox News eventually um, fired him, but Glenn Beck again reinvented himself as MAGA. Oh, America first. No more forever wars. No, I learned from my mistakes. No. Learn from my mistakes in Iraq. Yeah, I was wrong to support that war. No. We're not gonna support any more of these forever wars. And so Glenn Beck, he was in good odor, and then everyone just forgot. So Robert says, "Eye Patch McCain is Dan Crenshaw." That's the guy I was thinking of, Dan Crenshaw. Yeah. And so that was Glenn Beck, and there's, well, I want evidence. Well, here, how the evidence? They have 7 meetings, and Iran posed no threat to the United States. That's just fact. What's the threat? Where's the threat to the United States of Iran? We have the CIA findings from 20 years ago, and CIA has been absolutely consistent on this. Iran gave up its nuclear weapons program more than 20 years ago. We had Tulsi Gabbard, as I say, when she testified in March of 2025, she said Iran does not have a nuclear weapons program. Iran has abandoned nuclear weapons. We have the attack launched by Netanyahu last June, that even while Trump was supposedly negotiating with Iran, and then Trump joined Israel's attack. I mean, what kind of evidence are you looking for? I mean, Trump talks about with Israel, we are doing this. Trump is the first president to be fighting alongside Israel. No other president has done that. I mean, American presidents have supplied Israel with weapons, supplied Israel with money, but no American president has committed American armed forces to fight alongside Israel. Well, I want the evidence. Well, I don't see any evidence. Anyway, here is so more of this. These outraged reactions. And here's some guy called Josh Gottheimer. Joe Kent resigning and immediately pivoting to blaming Israel for everything is as predictable as it is unserious. Scapegoating Israel isn't just a tired anti-Semitic trope, it's anti-American. Really. Scapegoating Israel. Poor little Israel. This is a guy who ties to white supremacists. We've got the white supremacists, the neo-Nazis, and has Panzer tattooed on his arm, referring to Nazi tank infamously used in crimes against Jews. This has never been established. This is just one of those things that people have been repeating, that he has a Panzer tattooed on his arm. But people make all these claims. Have you actually seen that tattoo? Well, they haven't seen the tattoo. Kent's reduction of Iran to Israel's fold isn't leadership, it's bigoted deflection. Of course, it's just anti-Semitism. And then Mike Lawler, one of these Republicans, basically is just a mouthpiece for Israel. Joe Kent proved once again he was never fit for the job. He was a leaker who spent more time undermining our foreign policy than doing his job. Our foreign policy wasn't supporting our war. Now he's out of the door and blaming Jews on his way out. He didn't blame Jews, he blamed Israel. Good riddance. And then finally we have Caroline Leavitt, issued this long statement, very long statement about the resignation. He says, there are many false claims in this letter, but let me address one specifically, that Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation. Oh, so yeah, tell us, what was the imminent threat? This is the same false claim that Democrats and some in the liberal media have been repeating over and over. As President Trump has clearly and explicitly stated, he has strong and compelling evidence that Iran was going to attack the United States. Oh, well, as long as he has the evidence, that's fantastic. What exactly is that evidence that Iran, which is a quarter of the size of the United States, a military that is obviously, as we've seen just even in the past few days, that doesn't even remotely compare with the military of the United States. As Trump himself says, we are the strongest, best, most formidable military that the world has ever seen. Why exactly would Iran attack the United States? I mean, that just a little bit of common sense would be quite nice. He was going to attack the United States first. Yeah, that's what people do. What? Why don't we just attack the United States? That's a bloody good idea. And that's we're sure to defeat the United States. This evidence was compiled from many sources and factors. Oh, really? Where was it? Did ODNI, Tulsi, did she say that? President Trump would never make a decision to deploy military assets against a foreign adversary in a vacuum. It wasn't a vacuum. It was Israel. So no, we had evidence. Iran was going to attack the United States. When in history has that ever happened? When in history has a smaller, weaker power attacked out of the blue a much stronger power? Well, of course, it's never happened. What has happened in history, and there have been many, many cases of that, is that when stronger powers want to crush a smaller, weaker power, they cook up, manufacture a pretext, and the pretext is invariably that, oh, we were about to be attacked. We needed to act preemptively. I mean, they were about to do it. Germany did that, of course, in when it attacked Poland on September the 1st, 1939. It says, hey, Poland was the first to launch an attack. Poland attacked us. We were responding to a Polish attack. So this is it's a classic case of when you try to provoke a war. Now, when the smaller power wisely avoids getting provoked, then you attack anyway, and then you say, "Oh, they attacked us, or they were about to attack us." So this is the nonsense. This is absolute ridiculous, ludicrous nonsense that Caroline Levitt is putting out. Oh, Iran was about to attack the United States first, and so therefore Joe Kent is wrong. And then Iran is the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. Complete nonsense, of course. The Iranian regime is evil. Okay, so you got, okay. It proudly killed Americans, waged war against our country, openly threatened us all the way up to the launch of Operation Epic Fury. It threatened. Oh, really? It threatened you. Okay. Iran was aggressively expanding their short-range ballistic missiles to combine with their naval assets to give themselves immunity, meaning they would have a degree of capabilities that would give them immunity to hold us and the rest of the world hostage. How exactly building up your short-range ballistic missiles capability going to enable you to hold the world hostage when you don't have nuclear weapons and you're up against the United States and Israel, who have lots and lots and lots of long range, medium range, and short range missiles. And above all, they have lots and lots and lots of nuclear weapons. So how is Iran going to hold the world hostage? The regime aimed to use those ballistic missiles as a shield to continue achieving their ultimate goal, nuclear weapons. They use the shield to continue achieving their ultimate goal. Now, the one thing that is a bit of a giveaway is that when they talk about the missiles as a shield, well, a shield is essentially a defensive weapon. I mean, why do you have a shield? Well, because if somebody's going to come at me with a sword, I want to be able to defend myself. And I think it is true that Iran did build up a ballistic missiles capability, and not in order to attack anyone, because it hasn't. It's never attacked anyone. I mean, you look ever since the Iranian Revolution, it's Iran that's been attacked. It was attacked by Iraq, sponsored by the United States, sponsored, financed for a decade by the United States. And ever since then, the United States and Israel have threatened Iran. Iran has not attacked anyone. Um, and so here, so that's just, again, just you make all this stuff up about the aggression, because even when you say, "Oh, Iran has killed Americans," now whenever they say this, or Iran has killed Americans, what they mean is that Iran is responsible for the killings of American servicemen in Iraq following the invasion. Well, first of all, what the hell were Americans doing in Iraq to begin with? I mean, they invaded Iraq. So it's a little much to start complaining about Iran supposedly killing Americans when you basically invaded Iraq. You invaded a country right next to Iran, and Iran had every reason to be quite concerned about what the agenda is. What is the American agenda? The American agenda is then to invade Iran. And as we can see, even when CNN says, "Oh, no, it isn't true that Israel wanted America to invade Iraq." No, it was never happened. No, Israel wanted America to invade Iran. That's a bit of a giveaway. That's the CNN today. Oh, well, no, that was Sharon wanted an invasion of Iran. Yeah. I mean, he wanted Iraq first, then Iran. So Iran, if indeed it was responsible for the killings of American servicemen in Iraq, they did so because they were quite concerned about American forces in Iraq to its west, and then in Afghanistan to its east. Who wouldn't be concerned? I mean, every country is concerned about its security. If you have American forces on either side, that gives you, a lot to think about. So anyway, Caroline Levitt continues. So this is the official White House response to the Joe Kent resignation. And so anyway, but the point is that she's saying is that it's a shield. Yeah, it's a shield to defend itself. And they said the president, through his top negotiators, gave the regime every single possible opportunity to abandon this unacceptable course by permanently giving up their nuclear ambitions in exchange for sanctions relief, free nuclear fuel, and potential economic partnership with our country. We haven't heard any of these offers, about this sanctions relief. Also, the point here is that you give up nuclear enrichment, and give up your ballistic missiles, and then you have an American promise of sanctions relief, free nuclear fuel, and potential economic partnerships with our country. Now, the one thing we know, we can say with absolute 100% certainty, that none of those promises, if indeed that was the case, that these promises were made to Iran during the negotiations, none of those promises would ever be fulfilled, because the United States would always find a reason to withhold sanctions relief. The United States would always find a reason not to unfreeze Iran's assets, the United States would always find a reason, not to provide the free nuclear fuel. I mean, we know this with 100% certainty. It's not even anything worth arguing about. I mean, after the Vietnam War, the United States promised assistance to Vietnam, as part of reconstruction. Not one penny was paid out. America promised Serbia reconstruction after the bombing. Not one penny was ever paid out. Um, it's something I hear. Well, we're going to promise you all of this. Well, just like the JCPOA, we're going to promise you that we'll have sanctions relief. Okay, so you got sanctions relief for all of 2 years, and then the sanctions were, of course, put back in place, even though Iran hadn't done anything to deserve the reimposition of sanctions. But it was just obvious. This is exactly what would happen. So this deal would involve Iran giving up this, giving up that, and you'd get an empty promise from the United States, which it would immediately walk back. So that was, and incidentally, one case that's always brought up is the example of the North Korea. Oh, North Korea! North Korea broke its word. There was a deal with the Clinton administration in 1994, and then basically North Korea broke its pledges to the Clinton administration and developed nuclear weapons. That's completely untrue. It was the United States that never followed through on its deal with North Korea. Remember, North Korea actually put on hold all of its the plutonium production. In 1994, put on hold. That's it, all of its plutonium production. In exchange, the United States would provide North Korea with 2 light water nuclear reactors, and again they would provide all sorts of economic assistance, and that never happened. This was dragged on and on and on. It was quite obvious to the North Koreans the United States had no intention of building these 2 light water nuclear reactors. And also, I think they promised kind of nuclear fuel. That never happened. So it was then North Korea realized the whole point is to weaken us and prepare for an eventual U.S. attack. That's it. That's the goal. You're not interested in non-proliferation or whatever, other than to prepare for an eventual U.S. attack, which is what they did in the case of Libya, what they did in the case of Iraq, and now what they're doing in the case of Iran. So Caroline Levitt said, we're going to make all these promises, which are nothing. And then there's the example with North Korea. The Clinton administration, both Clinton and the Bush administration, never followed through on the promises that were made to North Korea in 1994. But the North Koreans, unlike the clerical government in Tehran, the North Koreans had the sense to realize, look, we're being prepared for a U.S. attack. We need to develop nuclear weapons right now. And that's exactly what they did. And Iran, I think, didn't do that. I think they made a huge strategic blunder in failing to do so, and a strategic blunder that should have been obvious following the invasion of Iraq, and should have been absolutely unambiguously obvious after the attack on Libya, because Gaddafi also gave up his nuclear ambition. So, I'm not quite sure what Iran was doing, from 2011 onwards. I mean, it's kind of dawdling. I mean, this was going to come. They had to have known this was going to come. So you really needed to prepare. Anyway, let's go on with Caroline Levitt. Um, so, so this was the deal. But they would not say yes to peace because obtaining nuclear weapons was the fundamental goal. So we know their fundamental goal, even though they never developed nuclear weapons, as was obvious, which is why we attacked them, because we knew they didn't have them. And they said, we're not going to develop them, and that's why they didn't have them. President Trump ultimately made the determination that a joint attack with Israel would greatly reduce the risk to American lives that would come from a first strike by a terrorist Iranian regime and address this imminent threat to America's national security interests. So, this first strike, Iran was going to launch this first strike against the United States. That's it. That sounds like good strategic thinking. We're going to attack the greatest military power in the world, a nuclear superpower. We don't have any nuclear weapons. We're essentially more or less a kind of a third world state, but we're going to attack the United States. Yeah, that's good thinking. All of this led to President Trump arriving at the determination that his military operation was necessary for U.S. national security, which is why he launched the massively successful Operation Epic Fury. The commander in chief determines what does and does not constitute a threat because he's the one constitutionally empowered to do so, and because the American people went to the ballot box and entrusted him and him alone to make such final judgment. Well, actually, they went to the ballot box because he promised to keep America out of wars. That's not what they were planning on. And in any case, he's not the one who makes these determinations. They're made by Benjamin Netanyahu. And finally, the absurd allegation that President Trump made this decision based on the influence of others. Oh, it's just absurd. It's so absurd. Even foreign countries is both insulting and laughable. I don't think anyone's laughing. President Trump has been remarkably consistent and has said for decades that Iran can never possess a nuclear weapon. Anyway, that was the ridiculous. Caroline Levitt can never have. So this is the point when they keep coming back, and you say, because when they're asked, well, what the hell are you doing? Why did you launch it? They already said, oh, Iran was about to attack us. And Iran has this ballistic missile capability, but Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. So they make stuff up, and then they start going on about this evil, horrible regime. So they still are unable to articulate what exactly is the objective, or at least why exactly did the United States do this? And so Joe Kent says, well, it was obvious because Israel wanted it. And then, got anti-Semitism. But otherwise, you have to believe some nonsense like Iran was about to attack the United States. Which is kind of odd because they more or less admit here, at least even Caroline Levitt and of course Trump himself admit that Iran didn't have nuclear weapons. Oh, they were about to get them within a month or so on. Why would then Iran attack the United States before it acquired nuclear weapons? I mean, you acquire your nuclear weapons first, then you attack the United States. I mean, that's assuming you're stupid enough to attack the United States, but your first order of business would be acquire your nuclear weapons and then you attack. But no, apparently, according to Caroline Levitt, according to Trump, Iran, without any nuclear weapons, was about to attack the United States. That's good thinking. Anyway, Trump today was had the Irish Prime Minister visiting him, and he spoke to the press And let's just watch a little bit of the of his statements in the Oval Office presser. So here it is then. What have you made, Mr. President, in getting America's allies to assist the U.S. in escorting those oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, we don't need too much help, and we don't need any help, actually. In fact, we just put out a notice. I was watching over the last couple of weeks, and all of our NATO allies were very much in favor of what we did. They thought it was very important. We were just discussing it, actually. Very important that we take out the nuclear threat from Iran, and we've done that very strongly, very powerfully. We've wiped out their Navy, wiped out their military in every aspect. Their Air Force is now decimated. They have no Air Force, no Navy. They have no radar. Their radar is entirely gone. Their anti-aircraft machinery is gone. Everything is gone. Their leaders are gone. I guess one of the top person was, they say, a lot of people say their actual top was killed yesterday, along with somebody else who was responsible for the killing. The man that was responsible for the killing of 32,000 people over the last 2 weeks. He was in charge of the killing of protesters. It's an evil group. I mean, they killed.
All right. So a lot of interesting nonsense there from Trump. So he says the person was killed using the passive voice. By using the passive voice, I mean, he's clearly making it clear this wasn't the United States, this was Israel. Because if the United States had done it, then he said, we did it. We absolutely got rid of the most horrible, evil man that has ever walked the face of the earth. And then he says this guy was responsible for these 32,000 killings. 32,000. I mean, how you managed to kill 32,000 people in the space of 3 days? That's quite remarkable. And you have to wonder where was this intelligence coming from that they killed 32,000 people? Well, we know where the intelligence was coming from. Where all intelligence that arrives on Trump's desk comes from. It comes from Israel. And they told him, "Oh yeah, this guy is responsible for 32,000 deaths in the space of a few days." But as I was saying earlier, I mean, here he's saying, "Oh, we got rid of him," but then the question raises itself, which is, well, if you get rid of him, somebody else is going to replace him. Well, what makes you think that this person will be an improvement on Larijani rather than someone who's going to be worse from a U.S. perspective? From an Israel perspective, they really don't care. They just want this. They want complete chaos. They want the destruction of the state. They want America sucked into this war, a nice, long, forever war for America to fight. And that whoever, somebody takes over from Larijani and Israel will kill him. But what's that got to do with the United States? Anyway, let's just watch a little more of Trump's presser.
Much more than 32,000 people. And the man who was responsible for that was also killed yesterday.
All right, so now it's much more than 32,000. So we first of all, we came up with this number, 32,000. Now it's much more than 32,000. And the man responsible, so one man apparently was responsible for all of this. Just imagine that. Just one man has basically killed 32,000 people.
And all of the NATO allies agreed with us. But they don't want to, despite the fact that we help them so much, we have thousands of soldiers in different countries all over the world, and they don't want to help us, which is amazing. I mean, amazing. And I didn't do a full court press because I think if I did, they probably would be. But we don't need help. You know, we've that war has been long prosecuted as far as I'm concerned, almost from day one. We knocked out many of these things. We knocked out the Navy essentially in a couple of days. But I was surprised to see that NATO, while they agreed that it was a very important thing to do, they agree fully. Nobody said, "Oh, you shouldn't do it." They would have had a nuclear weapon within 1 month of when we had the B-2 bombers bomb the nuclear potential. I call it the nuclear dust. Uh, so I think NATO's making a very foolish mistake, and I've long said that I wonder whether or not NATO would ever be there for us. So this was a great test because we don't need them, but they should have been there. The other thing is, and I think
All right. So that in itself is really fascinating. He says he first of all expresses his grief that NATO isn't there for the United States because they're not providing escort for the oil tankers and to break the blockade, if we can call it that, blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. And they said, well, we don't really need them. Well, if you don't need them, then why are you talking about it? But he's been talking about this incessantly, about how NATO is not providing any escorts. Now, it is true, and here Trump does make a reasonable point, that the Europeans, America's European partners, have indeed consistently said, yeah, fantastic. Everything you're doing against Iran is fantastic. Iran is an obvious threat. Iran is on the brink of having nuclear weapons. Everything that was done to Iran is the fault of Iran. Iran is the source of instability. Iran is the source of terror. Iran provoked this war. All the evils of the Middle East are the responsibility of Iran. That's what they've been saying. This is what all of France, Germany, UK, Kaya Kallas, von der Leyen, and all the rest of them. They all say the same thing. Oh yeah, Iran. So Trump says, well, if you think that, and if you agree with everything we've done, if you agree with our launching this unprovoked war, and you basically blame Iran for everything, then why don't you join us? I mean, basically, you obviously think that our cause is just, so what have you got against us? So Trump has a point there. I mean, if you think that Iran is the source of all evil in the Middle East and Iran provoked this war, then why are you saying no to providing escorts for the oil tankers? Escorts against the evil Iran. I mean, that's what they are. It's the evil Iranians. I mean, why aren't you joining America against the evil Iranians? So Trump does have a point on this. Anyway, then he goes on.
Very important. We didn't have to be there for Ukraine. Biden chose to spend hundreds of billions of dollars on Ukraine. And I guess the head of Germany just made a statement that, well, they weren't involved and they have nothing to do with the war. But at the same time, they think we did a great thing by knocking them out. Nobody wants to have Iran or anybody, but nobody wants to have Iran with a nuclear, because these people are crazy. They're absolutely crazy, and they're vicious, violent. I mean, think of it. They killed, now I hear it's about 41,000 people.
Okay, so now it's 41,000. So a moment ago it was 32,000. Now it's already 41,000. Okay.
Put out a notice 2 days ago. Anybody that protests will be immediately shot and killed. That's pretty tough stuff. So everyone agrees with us, but they don't want to help. And we as the United States have to remember that, because we think it's pretty shocking.
President Macron has just said in the last hour that he will never join
task force in the Strait of Hormuz until hostilities finish. Yet yesterday. So this is President Macron has said he's not going to join a task force in the Strait of Hormuz.
Who said that?
President Macron of France. What's your reaction to that?
Well, he'll be out of office very soon, so we'll have to see. I don't know.
On Doonbeg, you're building an extension to it at the moment, but there's been...
Okay, so let's just go on a little bit more. All right, let's...
objection put in, okay. And it's being held back at the moment due to small snails. What are you disappointed about that?
Planning Commission is. I have not heard that.
Planning Commission.
I mean, the course was built and it's been operated very successfully. Somebody's objecting. Human and environmental group is objecting to small snails at Doonbeg. Doesn't sound like the biggest problem I've ever had.
How closely is to announce a coalition of willing to secure the Strait of Hormuz? Which countries are joining and which countries have...
Well, we've had great support from the Middle East. Qatar has been great. UAE has been great. Saudi Arabia has been terrific. Bahrain has been very good. The Middle Eastern countries have been very strong in their support. And of course, Israel has been our partner. Israel's been very, very strong along with us. It's been a very strong collaboration. I was against Iran long before I even thought about Israel being against Iran. If you look back, many years ago, I talked about Iran was a big threat to this country.
All right, so, okay, let's go on a little bit.
Months ago or so, you would have had a nuclear war in the Middle East and maybe beyond. I think it would have hit Europe. Maybe not Ireland, but it would have hit Europe. I think you would have been a nice piece of it. It all gets you. It's big enough that you would have been affected. They would have hit Europe eventually.
Mr. President, your Director of National Counterterrorism, Joe Kent, he just resigned today. He said he can't support...
Okay, so now finally they're going to ask him about the resignation of Joe Kent.
Your conflict with Iran. What's your reaction to that? And did you talk
Well, I read his statement. I always thought he was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security. I didn't know him well, but I thought he seemed like a pretty nice guy. But when I read his statement, I realized that it's a good thing that he's out, because he said that Iran was not a threat. Iran was a threat. Every country realized what a threat Iran was. The question is whether or not they wanted to do something about it. And many of the greatest military scholars are saying for years that presidents should have taken out Iran because they wanted a nuclear weapon. They were, if we didn't do the attack, or if I'll go a step further, if I didn't terminate the Iran nuclear deal given to us, one of the worst deals ever made by Barack Hussein Obama. Remember when they sent Boeing 757s over there loaded with cash? Hundreds of millions of dollars. You would have been very happy. This was a wonderful, they sent hundreds of millions. People forget that. Does anybody remember? Right? You remember. Hundreds of millions of dollars in a Boeing 757. I think they had two of them loaded. They took the seats out and they put cash. And it was so much that there wasn't a bank in Virginia, Maryland, or D.C. that had any money left. They stripped them of all their money, put it into place, sent it to Iran, almost as ransom. That's not going to happen with Trump. And nobody ever did anything about it. Nobody ever said anything about it. Can you imagine if I did that? So they've been a threat for a long time. But they've really been a threat. If I didn't terminate Obama's horrible deal that he made, the Iran nuclear deal, you would have had a nuclear war 4 years ago. You would have had nuclear holocaust, and you would have had it again if we didn't bomb the site. So when somebody is working with us.
All right, so this is Trump, going on and on, and as I say, he does raise a point about the Europeans that is quite an interesting one, because he says, well, you don't care about the Strait of Hormuz. We're doing the Strait of Hormuz. You said that Iran is a source of evil. You're not going to put anything down. Well, what about Ukraine? He says, well, we don't. I don't care much about Ukraine. Of course, Ukraine was engineered by the Americans, by successive administrations up to and including, of course, Biden. And then Trump did inherit that war, but a war in which he didn't have very much interest. So basically, but he continued with it, but he never really had, his heart was never really in the Ukraine war. So he's saying to the Europeans, well, okay, well, that's what you care about. That's all you care about is Ukraine, and we help you and whatnot. But I can say the same to you. That I don't much care about Ukraine. You don't care about the Strait of Hormuz. You're leaving it up to us. Okay. Well, I don't care much about Ukraine. I'm going to leave it up to you. You do it. I mean, well, what do I care about Ukraine? And that does have a certain point. I mean, there's that since the Europeans, they're not that interested in this, but they are very interested in continuing the war in Ukraine, and they want to get America to fight their war in Ukraine, just like Israel wants America to fight its war against Iran. So they all have the same thing. Now, in the case of Iran, Trump is on board, not really, on board fully with Ukraine, but he's kind of saying to the Europeans, well, if you want us to help you on Ukraine, you need to come through for us. Anyway, Trump also sent out a tweet earlier. Let's just want to show. Where are we? In which he expressed very starkly his rage with the Europeans. And so here he is. The United States has been informed by most of our NATO allies that they don't want to get involved with our military operation against the terrorist regime of Iran in the Middle East. This despite the fact that almost every country strongly agreed with what we are doing, and that Iran cannot in any way, shape, or form be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. So okay. I mean, I guess he keeps talking about this nuclear weapon, and then he goes back and says, "Well, I destroyed their nuclear capabilities last June." And then even before that, it said, "Well, I walked out from the JCPOA." Well, none of these actions seem to have been particularly successful. I mean, if you walk out of the JCPOA in 2018, and then Iran is 1 month away from, supposedly 1 month away from having a nuclear weapon in 2025, then it doesn't sound like your walking away from the JCPOA was such a great idea, just given your own story. And then it doesn't sound like your bombing of June 2025 was particularly successful if they're apparently still on the brink of having a nuclear weapon. I am not surprised by their action, however, because I always considered NATO, where we spend hundreds of billions of dollars per year protecting these same countries, to be a one-way street. We will protect them, but they will do nothing for us, in particular in a time of need. Fortunately, we have decimated Iran's military. Their navy is gone, their air force is gone, their anti-aircraft and radar is gone, and perhaps most importantly, their leaders at virtually every level are gone and never to threaten us, our Middle Eastern allies, or the world again, because of the fact that we have had such military success. We no longer need or desire the NATO countries' assistance. We never did. Likewise, Japan, Australia, South Korea. In fact, speaking as the President of the United States of America, by far the most powerful country anywhere in the world, we do not need the help of anyone. Thank you for your attention to this matter. All right, so we don't need anyone. We absolutely don't need anyone, but please help us. So America alone, we have won, we have destroyed and defeated Iran. All of this stuff that he espouses, you know, there's simply no in basis in any intelligence finding. It's just sort of espouses, other than what he's getting from Tel Aviv. But anyway, let's then go to our uh, Gaggle locals board and speak to the Gagglers, the people who really keep this community on the road, and above all, they keep this the dogs satisfied to the extent that they can be. Just try to keep them as happy as possible. And oh, wait, here we are. And so really appreciate it. And I know the dogs appreciate or to the extent they can. They appreciate the generosity of the Gagglers. So thank you so much, everybody who contributes to our tip jar. And the first question here is from Danaki, who's a frequent contributor on Gaggle's locals page. So thank you so much, Danaki. And it says, Joe Kent, the only man with integrity in this goddamn administration, yes, that can keep his head held high. What a damning indictment of Trumpism his resignation turned out to be. No, I agree. And we talked about this at length earlier. The question now, obviously, is when is Tulsi going to hand in her resignation? Because her resignation would be far more significant, because she's, after all, a cabinet level official. He isn't. He works for her. So the administration can dismiss him and pile on slander and smears and everything else. But we call it neo-Nazi, leaker, and all the rest. We went through that. But if Tulsi were to resign, that would be a significant setback. Trump would have difficulties. I mean, he of course will. He's a huckster. He will try to dismiss it, but that's key. And where has she been all this time? It's always very strange, because he has these meetings, and who's sitting next to him? It's always his White House chief of staff, Susie Wiles. And it's very, very strange. Why is a White House chief of staff at his elbow, at the elbow of the commander in chief, rather than your intelligence chiefs? So yes, I agree that was a significant resignation, but we have to have more resignations. Otherwise, they're just going to smear Joe Kent and relegate him to the internet and YouTube and whatever. So there needs to be other resignations for it to have a significant. Of course, and as I said earlier, Tulsi, she's on record years ago saying no war with Iran, explicitly no war with Iran. So why is she just hanging on in this administration? And Robert agrees with me. So let's hope it incites mass resignation. Yeah, well, let's hope that Tulsi is the one who resigns. I think that would have a major impact. And I think by hanging on, she's not serving her own cause very well, because I think she'll then be a completely discredited figure. If she thinks, I can hang out till the last year of the administration and then I'll resign, and then and then I'll be held up to be a person of principle, and now I've got a big political future ahead of me. No, it doesn't work like that. This is the moment to submit your resignation. if you want to be regarded as somebody who has certain beliefs and certain principles, then now's the time to resign. Not in the sort of last year of the administration, because if she doesn't do that, if she does sort of leave it um, with only what I don't know 12 months to go of the administration and thinks, oh, now I'm going to run for president, that isn't going to happen. She'll just be a discredited figure in the way Colin Powell was. Because remember, Colin Powell, well, used to have a huge, adulation that was reserved for him. Everybody admired Colin Powell. He waltzed from one big job after another. He was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He was the defense secretary, national security advisor, secretary of state, and then obviously he was talked about as a future president. And then Iraq happened, and he went along with the lie about Saddam Hussein and the weapons of mass destruction, and he never resigned. And that's it. He basically pissed away his reputation. So something like that is going to happen to Tulsi Gabbard unless she resigns right away. So V. Michelli says, "Happy St. Patrick's Day from Ireland." Oh, thank you. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I hope you were very happy to see the Irish Prime Minister in the Oval Office, looking not terribly happy. He seemed to be squirming in his seat, trying to avoid making eye contact with Trump. So I don't know. Well, I mean, you kind of have to feel bad for him to be in that position. But anyway, good to hear from Ireland. And then here is Marty, who provides us with this picture of Fidel playing baseball. Yes, well, he was he was a big baseball fan, and yeah, things don't look very good for Cuba right now. And I think Trump may well get a success. I think in Cuba, I don't quite see how Cuba can survive for much longer. So that's so. I think Cuba, like Venezuela, I think Trump may pull something off there. Iran, I think, is still unclear what's going to happen there, because these policies of assassination, they're more or less admissions of failure. I mean, because this is what Israel always does, but Israel, that's just a way of just keeping the war going. I mean, Israel always does this: kill one leader after another, but that never comes to any kind of resolution. So anyway, thank you for that picture. And then here's Cynthia, this who's of course a film expert, film scholar, film encyclopedist, somebody who provides this learned film commentary for our Monday night screenings. She has an amazing knowledge of film history and the amazing knowledge of the production of films, and all of the vicissitudes that go into the making of films. And so, as you know, we do a Monday night screenings, and one of the great delights of the screenings is Cynthia's very learned commentary and really fascinating background information that she provides. And so we had Salvador, Oliver Stone's film, yesterday. And while I think it's not a particularly great film, not even a particularly good film, I like Oliver Stone's kind of, as a political figure. I quite like him, and he's done some quite decent documentaries. I don't think he's a particularly good filmmaker. I think he's always a little bit obvious, and tends to be a real, very, very moralistic. And I think Salvador has all of these drawbacks. But there are interesting things in it, and it's a nice reminder of the 1980s, of people who were around in the 80s and remember the debates of the 80s about Central America and Reagan and so on. So that's a nice reminder of those days. And of course, you have James Woods as always very interesting acting. But anyway, well, that's just a prelude to say that please watch the film. It's posted on our locals board, and as you watch, enjoy Cynthia's very learned and very, very, really interesting um, uh, commentary to go with the film. So, anyway, thank you so much, Cynthia. And Cynthia says, "Happy St. Patrick's Day, George." Thank you so much, Cynthia. I hope your night is cheery and beery. Yeah, I suppose. Yes, yeah, some beer here. Not really Irish beer, but my preference, I think, as I said before, is for Czech beer. But thank you for the sentiment. It says, regarding your suggestion for a movie poll on small-time crooks and corruption, here are a few titles to consider. King's Row. Oh yeah, that's Ronald Reagan's film, King's Row. Yeah, Roses Are Red. Do I know that film? Roses Are Red. Maybe I know that film. Desert Fury. Yep. Flamingo Road. Okay, that's not bad. Cover Up, 1949. Lightning Strikes Twice, 1951, and Bad Day at Black Rock. Um, some of those films I'm not entirely familiar with. I wouldn't have said Bad Day at Black Rock was about small time crooks. That's kind of a very moralistic film. It's more about anti-Japanese racism. It obviously takes place in a small town, and the key figures there, I guess, are crooks. But it was much more of a film, the kind of very kind of liberal, uplifting films that were made in the late 1940s and 1950s, attacking racism in America. So I mean, you remember some of those films, the Sidney Poitier films, but this one was Stanley Kramer made a number of those films, and Bad Day at Black Rock was made by John Sturges. He's the guy who made The Magnificent Seven. But Bad Day at Black Rock was really about about anti-Japanese racism. So, I mean, quite an interesting film. A little obvious, like was it? I think the film Crossfire, which was about anti-Semitism. So this was sort of in the kind of Cold War liberal era in Hollywood when they would be tackling these uplifting issues to show how liberal America was improving itself and how it was so much superior to the communist world. So, and Bad Day at Black Rock was, I think, a part of that. But those are good, interesting titles. I mean, I have a few titles of my own, but that's but those are interesting to go on with. So thank you so much. And okay, so then we have Aristotle 1, who says, thank you so much, Aristotle 1, who says, I think there's a possibility that the Trump administration tried to assassinate Putin at home. There seems to be a lot of assassination going around. Yeah, I agree with that. Is this historically normal in your experience, whether reported or not, or a sign of new authoritarian lawlessness? That really is a very good question. It generally wasn't the done thing to target the leaders of your adversaries. I mean, it happened obviously in war, whereby leaders were assassinated. But generally, assassinations were the purview of terrorists. stateless terrorists. Now, who made assassination a, a cardinal policy? And that was, of course, the Zionists, because the Zionists really pursued assassination through the years of the British Mandate, and as key policy. They assassinated British officials. They assassinated UN officials, and then, of course, they carried out all manner of terrorist bombings. Like the King David Hotel. They killed, assassinated Lord Moyne, assassinated Count Bernadotte. This was very much the Zionist project. And Israel has continued with this. Always this the policy of assassination. Now, the United States hasn't really done that on any consistent basis. I mean, there's always been speculation whether in the first days of the attack on Iraq in 2003, they tried to assassinate Saddam Hussein. Maybe they did, but they didn't seem to pursue this with any real consistency after the first day. And same with Gaddafi. They seem to target at one point Gaddafi, but again they didn't pursue it with any consistency. Same with Milosevic as well. They seemed to target and then kind of backed away. So it's I think it seems like, well, it's that there are people within the U.S. High Command that seem to like the idea of knocking out the leaders of adversaries, but then don't really follow through. Israel, on the other hand, does this all the time. That's always been their way of fighting, which is always conducting assassinations of the leaders of Hamas, assassination of leaders of PLO, assassinations of Hezbollah. This is what Israel has done. And as I say, this goes all the way back before even the creation of the State of Israel, that the Zionists conducted assassination. I mean, assassinations are not a particularly useful policy because, first of all, if you start targeting the leaders of your adversaries, then what's to stop them from targeting you? So that's not it doesn't really make very much sense. That's why it was often done by terrorists who just want to create as much mayhem as possible. And so I think the other thing is the reason why it doesn't make very much sense to conduct assassinations is that if you kill the leader of your adversary, then with whom will you negotiate? I mean, who's going to come next? So even in World War II, when you had Germany led by someone who was obviously reviled in the West, namely Hitler, there was no real attempt, at least on the part of the Allied powers, to kill him. I think obviously a consideration was that if you try to kill him, then what's to stop the Germans trying to kill Churchill or trying to kill Roosevelt? And you've also got the problem, which is that, well, if you kill him, then the next person may be actually a more effective leader than Hitler, will actually be able to would fight the war more effectively than Hitler had done. He would avoid making the mistakes that Hitler was making. So it's always a high risk strategy. You kill someone. Well, what makes you so sure that you're going to get someone better in his place? So that's why I think generally states have avoided that as policy, but except for Israel. And so this is really what's happening now. This attempt to just kill as many of the Iranian leaders as possible. This is a complete Israelization of U.S. policy. U.S. has never fought wars in this way. It's never done that. You know, it didn't do it in Vietnam. It didn't do it against the Chinese in the Korean War. It's never done it that way. And so this is the Israelization of policy, and it just creates chaos. It doesn't result in any military success, and you can see that. I mean, you know, Israel eventually wasn't able to defeat Hamas. Israel obviously hasn't been able to defeat Hezbollah. You can kill, you know, their leaders, but there's always going to be somebody else who's going to take over. So I think, you know, I think in the past this was avoided. You know, like this is not a good way of fighting a war. This is just, you know, leaving aside the morality, it doesn't really deliver results for you. Anyway, thank you so much, Aristotle 1. And then Cynthia, apropos of, apropos of Crenshaw, says, speaking of which, if you're into Western noirs, you've got to check out Black Patch, 1957. It's a hidden gem that feels more like a gritty street thriller than a typical cowboy flick. George Montgomery is great as a one-eyed marshal caught in a web of paranoia. Okay, that's a good one. That's a good title. That's the Black Patch. Let me write this down. Black Patch. Actually, that's, you know, thinking about the comments that Cynthia's making, the idea of this kind of Western noir, I rather like that notion, because, you know, we're used to the film noir, but there are the Western noirs that were actually really good. That starting in the sort of late 1940s and in the 1950s, that were absolutely really, you know, those are pretty good films. So that's okay. So it's got all the classic noir DNA, a messy love triangle, a murder mystery, and moody cinematography. Plus, it's the first ever score by Jerry Goldsmith, and he nails that psychological tension. All right, well, that's a very good idea. Yeah, okay, that's yeah. Thank you. That's a very good suggestion. And anyway, so thank you as always, Cynthia. And then Robert says, Paul Craig Roberts wonders whether Iran, China, Russia, Turkey, and the Gulf states will wake from their slumber and unite before the U.S. and Israel pick them off one by one. Well, whenever Paul Craig Roberts asks this kind of question, he in a way answers them himself. And the answer, of course, is no. I don't think they will. I think that Iran, China, and Russia had years and years. I think Turkey doesn't quite belong in that list because Turkey is a NATO power, and Turkey is never going to abandon NATO. And again, the Gulf states, they're aligned with the United States. I don't think they're going to abandon the United States. But Iran, China, and Russia is a different case, because all three states have known that the United States is going to come after them. United States in charge of its NATO alliance and its various satellite states strewn all over the world, all the Australias and New Zealands and South Koreas and Japan, all of that under the US tutelage. And once you put it that way, you can see this is a huge, overwhelming military power that's led by the United States. Faced with that, if you're, you know, leaders of China and you're the leaders of Russia, you think we need to get our act together, because, you know, we're up against somebody much stronger than we are, and they are going to come after us. You know, maybe not today, maybe not this administration, but tomorrow, and maybe another administration. So you then have to wonder, well, where the hell have Iran, China, and Russia been for the last 2 decades? Well, the truth is they haven't really been doing anything very much. They've been pursuing their kind of will o' the wisp kind of goal of trying to keep in with the Americans and trying to keep in with the West, but they haven't really got their act together, to say the least. Now that's why it was very interesting. Somebody wrote on the Gaggle locals board that this key event was, of course, the Soviet leaders, for reasons that we still don't fully understand, in the late 1980s decided to destroy their own state. Quite why they decided to do it is, as I say, somewhat mysterious, but but obviously something that can be discussed on another occasion. But they did decide to destroy their own state, and more importantly, to switch sides. They decided that they were joining the West. Now, by the time Putin seemed to have realized it, and I don't even know whether Putin fully realized it, that this was never going to work, it was already a little late. NATO was already in place. The balance of power had shifted very decisively and very menacingly against Russia, and it was already too late to stop the expansion of NATO. I think that was already a done deal. Then you only have one option that you can exercise, and that is you form an alliance with China. Russia, China, and Iran form a military alliance. Together, that becomes quite a formidable resistance to the West. Separately, and they seem to insist on separation. I mean, they all just say, "Well, we got a partnership without limits," but a partnership that doesn't involve a serious military alliance, something comparable to NATO. NATO is a real military alliance. It is an integrated command. Everybody has his role inside NATO. You do as you're told by the Supreme Allied Commander, who is an American. So that's NATO. But Russia and China go out of the way to say, no, we're going to keep our military separate. Well, you keep them separate, you're going to get picked off one by one. I mean, as I said before, Iran is just the appetizer. So because all of Russia's allies are kind of being rolled up one after another. Syria, gone. That's a long-time ally of the Soviet Union, gone. Venezuela, Maduro was part of the Russian alliance system, gone. Cuba, I think, is on its last legs. I think that's going to be gone pretty soon. And then we got Iran. And if Iran does fall, I don't know if it will, but it's a possibility. So Iran could collapse. Then what do the Russian leaders think is going to happen? You think Trump, we're just going to leave it at that? Trump was going to go immediately after Russia, and as said earlier, yeah, they've already tried to assassinate Putin. Absolutely, they will try to assassinate Putin and assassinate top Russian leaders, and try to create as much turmoil as possible inside Russia, and maybe they think that there's a kind of Delcy Rodriguez option inside Russia. Maybe there's somebody in Russia who will be ready to take over and be the new Yeltsin, or the Delcy Rodriguez Yeltsin who will take over from decapitated Russian leadership. I'm sure that is exactly, those are the plans that are being discussed and drafted now in the Pentagon. So that's Russia. And then if Russia's gone, then it'll be China. So, I mean, one question that I have, and that which I think is quite revealing, that why isn't Russia using this opportunity of America's distraction in the Middle East? America's very distracted now. Why isn't Russia using this opportunity to wrap up that war with Ukraine? I mean, we've heard about Ukraine's on its last legs now for years. Do it now, because the United States really can't be bothered with Ukraine. The Europeans, without the United States, they can't do anything. No one's going to send anything to Ukraine because whatever's available is all being sent to the Gulf. So no one is sending anything to Ukraine. This is the time for Russia to wrap it up. Yet I don't see any particular urgency from Moscow any more than I remember when after October the 7th, there was a lot of gloating in the alt media about, oh yeah, this is really bad for Zelensky because now Zelensky goes to the back of the line, because Israel, of course, is far more important to the United States than Ukraine is, and therefore everything is going to go to Israel and nothing at all for Ukraine. Well, what happened there? That was October the 7th, 2023. Russia, again, didn't exploit that opportunity either. That was, again, America was very distracted by Israel. So that was another opportunity that seemed to have vanished. So, if Iran does collapse, all of American and NATO energy are going to be directed at Russia. Then this to say, hey, all of the West's adversaries are falling one by one. Now is the big one, the big prize, the big enchilada, which is Russia. Anyway, then in response to that, so anyway, thank you, Robert, for that question. And then Cynthia responds saying, it's a sharp take. In my opinion, what looks like slumber might actually be strategic patience. Rather than a sudden wake-up call, we're seeing a slow-motion realignment through groups like BRICS and the SCO. They aren't just waiting to be picked off. They're quietly building a multipolar safety net to insulate themselves before making a collective move. That's a nice idea. I think it would be great if that were the case. I have my doubts. Iran is a member of BRICS. And I don't see anyone in BRICS doing very much about Iran. And we talked last week about what happened at the UN Security Council. And, that would have been an opportunity for Russia and China to express their support for Iran and to veto any UN resolution that condemned Iran. But instead, the UN Security Council adopted a resolution that condemned Iran, and only Iran. Nobody else. Didn't condemn the United States, didn't condemn Israel. It condemned Iran, and Russia and China abstained. So the only UN Security Council resolution that has been adopted on this war of aggression was the one adopted last week, and it condemned Iran. A BRICS member and Russia and China didn't seem to have much to say about it. But in fact, both Russia and China have been remarkably quiet about this attack against their great ally. You just seem to say nothing. And it's to be honest, even back in the 90s, when Serbia was attacked by NATO, even then, the sort of Yeltsin's Russia seemed to express greater anger about what NATO was doing against their great ally, Serbia, than they are expressing any anger over what's being done to Iran. So even then, and that was before the whole heyday of multipolarity. So to be frank, given the lack of any meaningful resistance to what's being done to Iran by BRICS, by Russia, by China, the multipolar world is going to have to wait for another day. It's not coming anytime soon. But anyway, thank you, Cynthia. And, we'll see what happens. And then Cynthia says, as long as Thomas Massie doesn't become a Tulsi Gabbard, I remain hopeful for my country. Okay, well, that's good. Anyway, so thank you, Cynthia. And then Anne-Marie, always very good to see you. Thank you, Anne-Marie, for finding the time to join the live stream, and thank you for your very generous contribution. Anne Marie is, of course, a world-renowned musician. She's a distinguished violinist who's has performed in some of the outstanding orchestras of the world and has worked with some of the leading composers and conductors of the 20th and 21st centuries. And she also provides us with a very interesting and very insightful musical commentary. And so, whenever we post pieces of music in our Gaggle Music Club, we're fortunate to have a true master of music providing commentary on that. And so, therefore, that Anne Marie's contribution should be a spur for others to join our community, because we really have some of the most outstanding kind of artists and experts and scholars and philosophers who are part of the Gaggle community. And so they should encourage everybody, please subscribe the gaggle.locals.com, and you'll be part of this really outstanding community. It doesn't cost very much. I mean, you can even subscribe for free. I wouldn't advise it, but you could do it. But I think being part of this community is well worth it, and so and especially worthwhile is learning about the intricacies of playing some of the most difficult pieces of music ever composed, and we learn that from Anne Marie. So Anne Marie, thank you as always for your generosity. And that, I think, just about wraps it up. So thank you, everybody who joined us today. Thank you for all of your comments and questions. And above all, thank you for the contributions to the tip jar. The dogs will be waking quite soon, and will make their feelings known. It's never a pleasant sight. They're always blaming me, and always vent their frustration with me. But that's my problem. Thank you, everybody who contributed. Thank you for trying to make the life for the dogs a little more tolerable. We will be back on Thursday at it's still the U.S. Thing. So it's a 4 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday. Please join me. Thank you very much. Good night. Bye-bye. All the best.